As dividend investors, we all love seeing the stocks and ETFs in our portfolios issuing us our dividends. And while a certain amount of stocks and ETFs pay investors on a monthly basis, the vast majority of companies and funds out there pay investors quarterly. While there isn't anything wrong with being issued dividends quarterly, if you're seeking to live off of your dividends, it makes things harder in terms of budgeting your expenses. Being paid a dividend that you have to spread out over a 3-month period isn't as ideal as being paid a monthly dividend. Monthly dividends allow for less time budgeting and requires less self-control since you don't have to spread this dividend payment out over 3 months and instead just one. But we all know that working an actual job results in us being given a paycheck twice a month or even every week for certain workers. For people who want to live off dividends, being paid more than once a quarter or even once a month is always going to be more desirable. I know that a lot of dividend investors out there actually like to construct their portfolios so that they do receive a dividend check from one of their holdings every single week. If you weren't aware, there actually are 2 ETFs out there that do pay dividends every single week. Ticker symbols WKLY and TGIF, both of which are managed by SoFi, pay dividends to shareholders every single Friday. I've analyzed both of these funds before in the past on this channel, so if you want a more in-depth look, you can feel free to check out those videos. But after analyzing both of these funds, I came to the conclusion that other than the cool ticker symbols, neither of these funds were really worth it. I calculated the dividend yield for both of these funds, and I discovered that they actually have an annualized yield of only around 2%. TGIF currently trades for over $100 a share, and it only pays 5 cents a week. WKLY trades at over $50 a share, and it only pays about 2 cents every week. And so far, neither fund has ever increased their dividend. In my opinion, if you're going to offer a dividend yield that low, it should at least be growing, but to date it hasn't. So while these funds may be appealing to some people, they're just not my cup of tea personally. Maybe one day there will be a better option for a weekly dividend ETF that actually has a worthwhile dividend yield, but for the time being, if you want a dividend payout every single week, your best bet would be to construct a portfolio that consists of several different holdings. So in today's video, we're going to be taking a look at several different stocks, ETFs, and closed-end funds that pay high dividends and will help you construct a high dividend portfolio that'll ensure you'll receive a dividend payment every single week. One thing to keep in mind is that the payout date for a lot of these funds aren't always at the exact same time. I've been wanting to create this video as a reference for a while, but one of the biggest challenges I've faced is finding stocks and funds that pay during the exact same week for every single dividend distribution. For example, when taking a look at RYLD, the payout date for this ETF is almost always in the last week of the month, but there were 2 occurrences where shareholders weren't actually paid until the first week of the following month. I'm not entirely sure why this was the case, but keep in mind that there may be months for virtually every single one of these holdings where this happens. But these securities for the most part are pretty consistent with which week they pay shareholders. Also be sure to do your own research and due diligence before investing in any of these funds. Make sure you're confident and you understand what you're investing in. I've covered a lot of these funds I'm going to mention on my channel before if you want a more in-depth explanation of what some of these are. So with that being said, let's get into it. Here's our calendar we're going to be referencing for this video. Let's first take a look at some securities we can invest in that typically pay out during the first week of each month. One option is ticker symbol JEPI, which is a covered call ETF that currently offers a dividend yield of about 7.5%. I've covered this fund numerous times on this channel before, and it's one of the biggest covered call ETFs out there. Here's a video if you want more information on it. But JEPI typically pays dividends between the 4th and 7th of each month to shareholders, so this is one option worth considering if you're looking for a high dividend yielding ETF. Additionally, there's a high yielding closed-end fund that typically pays between the 1st and 3rd of every month, which is ticker symbol PDI. I've held this fund in the past and I was pretty satisfied with the results. This CEF pays a monthly dividend and has a yield of over 9%, but there is something important that I should mention about this fund. Last month, shareholders of PDI, along with another similar fund, PCI, voted to approve a reorganization of several PIMCO funds. What's happening is apparently 2 funds, PCI and PKO, are going to reorganize into PDI. From what I've read, while PDI's management fee will be reduced, some people are speculating that this merger could result in a dividend cut in the not-so-distant future. Nobody knows how much of a cut that could be or even if that will happen, but it's worth keeping in mind. PDI has a pretty solid history of delivering, though. If you're interested in a BDC, SLR Senior Investment Corporation, ticker symbol SUNS, is a monthly paying stock that has consistently been paying between 10 and 12 cents per share on a monthly basis since 2011. SLR typically pays between the 1st and 3rd of each month, but as you can see, they did pay early one month back in April of this year, and while there really hasn't been much growth, this stock's dividend has been pretty dependable up to this point. Let's look at some options that typically pay dividends during the 2nd week of each month. Honestly, from my research, there just aren't nearly as many options in terms of higher dividend yielding investments that pay during the 2nd week and the 3rd week of each month. Nearly everything pays during the 1st or last week of each month, but despite that though, I was able to locate a few options. One higher yielding stock that typically pays shareholders between the 9th and 12th of every month is AGNC, which is a mortgage REIT. They're definitely one of the most popular companies in the MREIT space, along with Annaly Capital Management and New Residential, but AGNC pays dividends monthly unlike the other two. Their stock currently offers a dividend yield of over 9%. Another stock that typically pays around the 12th to the 15th of every month is Main Street Capital, ticker symbol MAIN. They're a private equity firm that specializes in equity capital to lower middle market companies. I've talked about them several times on this channel before, and I know that based on the comments I've seen, a lot of you seem to really like this one. Unlike a lot of business development companies, Main Street Capital has seen a lot of long-term growth up to this point, not just in their share price, but they've been continuously increasing their dividends over the years. Right now, their stock currently yields over 6%. There are a number of ETFs by Global X that do pay dividends during the 2nd week of each month, but I'm honestly not too big a fan of any of these funds. I will mention a few of them now though, you're free to come to your own conclusion, but I'll show you why exactly I'm not a big fan of any of these. The Global X Super Dividend ETF, ticker symbol SDIV, typically pays between the 11th and 14th of each month, and while the dividend yield is impressive, if we look at the long-term performance of SDIV, we can see that the share price has continued to fall as well as their dividend distributions over the long term. Their other dividend fund, ticker symbol DIV, has also been on a downward slope in terms of their share price and their dividend amounts. There is one fund by Global X that pays during this week that I'm a fan of, which is their preferred ETF fund, ticker symbol PFFD. It currently offers a dividend yield of over 5%, and while there hasn't been any growth to this fund because it's full of preferred shares, it at least pays a pretty dependable dividend every month. I made a video not too long ago about preferred share ETFs and closed-end funds, so you can feel free to check out that video if you're interested in learning more about these safer, higher-yielding ETFs and closed-end funds. This last fund I'm going to talk about pays quarterly, so you won't receive a dividend every single month, but I believe it's a pretty solid choice. I'm talking about the Liberty All-Star Equity Fund, ticker symbol USA. It currently offers an impressive 9% plus dividend yield, and they've been increasing their dividend distributions over the last 10 years. It's a closed-end fund, so it does charge a higher expense ratio, but it's honestly not as high as the majority of other high-yielding CEFs I've come across. In the 3rd week of each month, one ETF that typically pays around this time is NUSI, which is another covered call ETF. This fund not only uses covered calls to generate a high amount of income, but it also uses protective puts as a way to offer downside protection during turbulent markets. It currently offers a dividend yield of over 7.5%. It's also around this time that all of the Credit Suisse exchange-traded notes pay their monthly dividends, which are ticker symbols USOI, SLVO, GLDI, and REML. These funds are notorious for their exceptionally high dividend yields. If you regularly watch my channel, you'll know that I've talked about these funds several times before. But if this is your first time hearing about these, there are some things you need to keep in mind. Exchange-traded notes are significantly riskier investments, mainly because the issuing financial institutions can choose to delist them at any time they want. This is what happened in one particular instance with ticker symbol MORL. UBS called the notes, and basically any amount of money you would have invested in this would have been completely wiped out. But it did offer a 25% dividend yield at one time, which meant you would have doubled your original investment in just 4 years. So if you do decide to look into these funds, make sure you understand the risks and you don't invest too heavily. They also don't have a good long-term track record in terms of their share price. I know the dividend yields are extremely appealing, but it's extremely important that you proceed carefully should you choose to. A company that typically pays during this week is Prospect Capital, ticker symbol PSEC, which is a stock that I've covered a few times before as well. This business development company does offer a really nice dividend yield, but I would also consider this stock to be riskier than others I've already mentioned, like Main Street Capital. They don't have as solid of a track record in terms of share price appreciation, but it's remained somewhat steady for the past several years. I'm also just going to give a brief shout out to one of my favorite monthly dividend REITs, which is Realty Income, which also has almost always paid during the third week of every month. It has a much lower dividend yield of a little over 4% compared to the others on this list, but their track record is pretty much unbeatable in terms of being able to grow their dividends over the decades. Now let's look at the last week of each month, which undoubtedly offers much better options than the previous 2 weeks. Before I get to that though, if this video has provided you with any sort of benefit, please consider clicking the thumbs up button below, and also subscribe to the channel if you want more high dividend investing videos. Thank you all so much for watching this far, as well as your continual support. QYLD as well as RYLD both pay their dividends at the end of each month, although sometimes they pay at the beginning of the following month. These are both covered call ETFs, with QYLD being the most popular of the two. They both offer sky-high dividend yields of over 11% each. Another fund I haven't talked about before on this channel that has really good monthly dividends with some pretty good growth behind it is the Amplify CWP Enhanced Dividend Income ETF, which is ticker symbol DIVO. Although it only offers a dividend yield of about 5% compared to the others on this list, this fund does have some great amount of growth behind it. It's up over 18% from the previous year, and it's up over 35% from about 5 years ago. Dividend growth for DIVO has also been really great as it's continued to trend forward. This fund actually used to pay a quarterly dividend, but they started paying monthly back in 2018. If you've ever been to the subreddit QYLD gang, which is a community of people who love to invest in covered call ETFs, DIVO is another fund that strategically uses covered calls for their dividend distributions. If you're looking for a safer alternative to covered call funds, my favorite preferred ETF, ticker symbol PFFA, typically pays between the 28th and the 31st of each month. It's similar to PFFD, which I just discussed earlier, but PFFA offers a much higher dividend yield. Again, like all preferred stock ETFs and closed-end funds, there isn't going to be a whole lot of growth here, but they typically offer much higher dividend yields and they're usually safer. And that's a look at some different options if you're interested in collecting dividends every week. I definitely think that if you want a dividend payment every single week, it's better to invest in multiple funds instead of one of those weekly dividend ETFs I mentioned earlier. Again, be sure to do your own research and perform your own due diligence before investing. Alright everyone, that's going to wrap up today's video. Thank you all so much for watching, I really do appreciate it. If this video benefited you in any sort of way, please click the like button below and click subscribe if you want to see more dividend investing strategy videos. It would just let me know that there's a sizable enough audience out there who wants this kind of content, and I'll continue to provide you all with that content. Alright everyone, thanks again for watching, and I'll catch you next time. Take care.